Good evening, thanks for coming. The Alberta Off-Highway Vehicle Association is hosting this information session for the Bighorn Backcountry. This meeting is to explain and discuss the pressures these public land zones with various stakeholders in attendance who are active in stewardship roles on the Alberta landscape. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 6 presentations by various stakeholders. We'll complete, and then Rick will present at the end on the North Saskatchewan planning process. We will then follow with a question and answer, and we're going to hopefully keep moving along, and we hope to be wrapped up by 9 p.m. So to start off with, Garrett with the Alberta Off-Highway presentation.
So we're the Alberta Off-Highway Vehicle Association. Basically what we're going to do tonight is we're just going to talk about, quickly go through a presentation on who the Alberta Off-Highway is, the Bighorn Backcountry as it exists today, some of the environmental pressures, and what we're pushing for in collaborative solutions. So the AOHVA is the provincial recognized organization representing all-terrain vehicles. We're a non-profit. We're under the Canadian Off-Highway. It's the Alberta organization. So our organization is comprised of a diverse group of volunteers. We're all passionate outdoor guys, right? Memberships, we've got around 20 clubs from across Alberta. There's roughly about 165,000 users of off-highway vehicles. And OHVs are pretty much the central of recreational activities by around about 500,000. You know, with our numbers, how many people go in a group? Is it 2 or 3 that have a machine? So, as an organization, we're dedicated to providing safe, motorized recreational activities in an environmentally responsible and sustainable manner. We want to preserve the recreation, and we want to preserve the environment. In addition to the advocacy that we do, we focus a lot on education, safety. We administer the safety programs. You guys have known that the helmet laws come out. We work with the government to make sure that that stuff is put out there. And then we work with the clubs on the maintenance and trails and associated facilities supporting those. So we do education programs and safety programs. We promote stewardship, you know, respectful, responsible use. We promote environmental stewardship. And, you know, we're an advocate for continued OHV use across Alberta. Just to give you guys a quick number, OHV use in Alberta generates just about $2 billion of GDP to Alberta every year. And those numbers were from a study. Employment's around 11,600 people. That's a study done in 2016 with the Canadian Off-Highway. In Canada-wide, it's about 8 billion across Canada. So most of the users that we have, we've done surveys, how many people do our trips. The average age of the guys out there, we're 25 to 65. Right in the middle, around that 35 to 44 range, right? So in Alberta, the government's collected registration fees for OHVs, pretty much it's been 30 years. Between 09 and 17, this probably, by our numbers, is pretty close to about $50 million that's been collected from OHV use on the registration of those machines. Unlike some other provinces, there is no dedicated funding model for those fees. Those fees go into direct revenue. So there is no funding model for sustaining the trails in Alberta, like other jurisdictions, Ontario, Quebec. Just an example, in Alberta, so you see we're paying $54. None of the funding goes back at all to any of the clubs from the registration fees. Quebec actually takes out $21 and you do trail permits. That's how they use the funding to sustain their trails on Quebec. Nova Scotia, they actually take OHV fee and then $40 actually goes back. And then New Brunswick is 25, about half. So getting a little more into what we're talking about now is our public lands. I wanted to put this up. So if we take Alberta's public lands and we say Alberta owned land or crown land, so out of all the land, about 74% is crown land. 23% of that land is protected through either designation federal or provincial, because you can have a provincial park or a federal park, and if it's classified as a protected area. And in Alberta, roughly about 2.2% of the land is what we call public land use zones, which is the Bighorn. Of that, the Bighorn represents just about 60% of the public land use zones in Alberta. Most of the public land use zones are along the eastern slopes. When we look at recreation by areas in Alberta, there's 461 places for non-motorized only, and there's 34 areas in Alberta that motorized is permitted through dedicated areas or designated trails. So where we're at now is we're having the conversation about the Bighorn. And the Bighorn, we've got Castle right now has turned into provincial park. Those trails represented about 14.2% of the designated trails in public land use zones. The Bighorn backcountry represents about 52.8, so big landmass. So Coal Branch is just north of us. Coal Branch is about 8%, and the balance of the public lands is about 25%, just off the eastern slopes. So the elephant in the room, there is a tremendous amount of lobby pressure from foreign-funded environmental groups on how Alberta does and what it does with its public lands. One of these groups, Yellowstone to Yukon, is heavily US funded, and the impact and pressures that are on the Bighorn, their proposal will not only remove managed motorized recreation and the volunteer user trails, but it also proposes to limit resource extraction. So if we look at the map, this is the Bighorn today. It consists of 6 pluses. You've got Kiska-Wilson is the one covered by Nordegg. That's where most of the off-road is. Upper Clearwater is the blue Hummingbird area. Of those areas, that is roughly 1.2 million square kilometers. This is the proposed plan. It's not the government plan. I want to be very clear. It is the environmental group's plan that they are lobbying the government to push. So just to define the difference between a wildland park, crown land, and public lands is crown land is unmanaged land. Public land use zones allow legislative ability for the government to designate use. So for example, on crown land, you can have unmanaged recreation. There is not any legislative ability to restrict that. And unmanaged recreation is an issue. Public land use zones create the ability for the government to designate use. In our PLUS areas, you are not allowed to ride off trail. Not allowed. So there's designated trails. In a wildland park, there's only one wildland park in Alberta that you can ride on on OHV use, and I think it's north of Fort McMurray. So this is kind of the impact of what's being proposed along the eastern slopes. I just had a pitch up of our oil place. So I don't want to harp on science, but I do want to bring it up because we're hearing a lot about OHV use is bad. I think bad OHV use is bad. OHV use on designated trails and proper recreation is not. But we've heard a lot about linear density. If you guys have heard that, what's going to happen? You can only have so much linear density. So we had a science committee get together in 2017. We went through the science. To give you an idea on density, the science is based on 10,000 vehicles, average, driving 120 kilometers an hour on a 10 to 30 meter wide road. It's basically highways. Those impacts were correlated to OHV use on a 2 meter or 10 foot, 20 foot wide trail. At less than 8 to 10 vehicles per day drive those trails at speeds of 15 kilometers. So there's a difference between this impact and this impact. Just to show you guys how much use right now is in the Bighorn, there's roughly, as you can see, that's 2010, 11, 12, 13. This is the dam site. We're looking at about 2,000 people a year. There's some trail counters in there so they can monitor use. This is the water quality issue. We pulled this from AEP. The very top, the 100 all the way across, that's the North Saskatchewan River upstream of Clearwater. The second one is the North Saskatchewan River at Devon. It's 100 all the way to Edmonton. And the North Saskatchewan downstream of Edmonton, there's the water quality. So when we hear issues that the water quality is being affected from recreation in the Bighorn, that's the reporting from AEP. So there is going to be economic impacts if these plans go through. We know that the changes will take, they're going to have an impact on Albertans, their ability to ride, people to random camp. There are solutions. So what we're basically saying is that we really need to focus on the real issues, use applicable and proven science, and we don't want to polarize the issue. There are issues out there, and we want to deal with the issues. We do have plans. So we believe that true stakeholder consultation and collaboration is not going to be the stakeholders just filling out a public survey. We want the Alberta government to work with the recreational stakeholders. We want them during the planning process and before the planning process to address the issues and come up with the solutions. So the recreational stakeholders are experts, whether it's fishing, equestrian, camping, hunting. These guys know, right? They should be in on the planning process to help. We have a 4-point plan. It's design and develop, protect and partner, provide the tools and mandate, and provide a better experience for the riders. We know that if you do not make the trails, if you do not make the experiences on trail, people will go off trail. So it's taking the stakeholders and working with the government to identify what the issues are, create a solution. That's what we're after. So some of the benefits that we know about having the trails, it's simply going to be that, you know, there's private land issues from people going off trail. If there's not places to ride, people go other areas. And if they're going to go other areas, then we create more pressures. So people are not going to stop recreating. What we got to do is manage that recreation and provide solutions for that recreation so it's sustainable. So we're committed. We're committed to making the solutions that work in other jurisdictions, working in partnership with the government and the municipalities, providing our experience and input for providing better designed trails, experiences, and in the construction and maintenance of those trails. And implement a framework that provides a social, economic, and environmental balance with the cost funded by the users, not Albertan taxpayers. And I was cutting it short, but I know that's a lot. But thank you.
Thanks, Garrett. We're gonna do a presentation here on behalf of the Bighorn ATV Society. The three of them here do a tremendous amount of work in the Bighorn area, so we're gonna do a short, just 5-slide presentation for Bighorn ATV Society.
The Heritage ATV Society was started in May 2002. It's created by some vested volunteers to promote and maintain environmentally and friendly trails for all users in the Bighorn. They maintain and look after the trails in both the Hummingbird and the Bighorn Dam areas. The society is run strictly by volunteers. These guys have built bridges. They've rejuvenated trails. They've cut culverts. They do all the trail maintenance. 100% of their work is volunteer. To give you an idea of some of the work they've done, culverts, riprap, this is the work and equipment that these guys have invested to the trails that Albertans, both Edmonton, Red Deer, Calgary, all come out and enjoy. They supplied some hours. It's very interesting. So since 2002, these great guys have dedicated over 10,000 volunteer hours. They put a cost on it at $15 an hour, but I think the minimum wage is more than that now, so it's probably not accurate. But at $159,000, but 10,000 hours in the last 12 years. That's a lot of work. They've, through donations and supporters, about $231,000 in equipment, materials, and supplies invested. And I think that number's far lower than actually spent. There was a federal grant that was done with the National Trails Coalition, administered at the Alberta Off-Highway. It's a 50-50 match that we are able to do with the federal. But in the total contributions that they put into the backcountry, it's about $410,000 to date. That $410,000 with trail counters at 3,000 to 6,000 on average trip expenditures, we know that our reporting down in Castle was $572 per trip is what the average guy spent to go. We know that survey data that we're pulling out of Bighorn, the numbers are far higher because the travel distance from the locals, whether it's Edmonton or Calgary, it's a farther drive. So at 800, so we estimate that the yearly community enhancements from the work that they've done on the trails and our access to trails, it's between $2.4 and $6 million of direct expenditures to the municipalities affected. That's Nordegg and Rocky and surrounding. These are some of their community supporters: Turple Brothers, Rainy Creek, Schaefer, Les Neals with Oilfield Contracting, E.T., Frank's Welding and Rocky, Olamel, Glover Truck, Parkland Sled, Beller Enterprises, Anugas, Edwards Garage, Gateway Sales and Service, and Precision Cycle. These guys have done a lot of work. Dennis is the president. Will does the work, right? But is there anything else, guys, you'd like to add? These guys just done a great job for us, you know, to be able to ride out there. I think a lot of people think those trails just are like that when they go out there, and they're not. There's a lot of work that goes into maintaining them. The guys that are out there, they love the environment. They don't want to wreck it, you know. And these guys are out there spending their clubs, and we have 20 member clubs, and this is what the clubs do. They go out there and maintain those trails. And the guys come out, if they're not club members, they still get to use the trails, and that's why we're always supporting. Guys, support the clubs. If you go to an area that you ride, join the club, right? So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. Larry, I'd just like to ask, come up with Larry Fricke. He's the other local club that does a lot of work in the Bighorn area. He's with the Eastern Slopes, and I'll let him speak for a bit. But they do a tremendous amount of volunteer work on campgrounds, horse trails, and other things in the Bighorn area. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to see a nice full hall. I don't have pictures to show you, so you're just going to have to listen to me here tonight. And I don't have a long presentation by any means. Most of you, I am sure, know what Friends of the Eastern Slopes is all about. And For those that don't, our founding was linked to Parks Canada wanting to throw us out of the Bighorn campground on the Ahatinda Ranch. So that was in the fall of '93. In spring of '94, a group was formed. We lobbied the government, said, leave us there, we'll take care of it, we'll improve it, we'll maintain it, and that was granted. And that's gone on now to where we now basically operate 6 campgrounds. There's Eagle Creek just outside of the east border of the Ahatinda Ranch. There's a Panther campground on the south side of the Red Deer. And then the rest are north. We've had Cutoff and Hummingbird now for quite a number of years. And our latest acquisition was the 7 Mile campground, which we lobbied Parks Canada for a long time, a few years of probably more than that. We have now finished 2 years of operating that campground. That campground sat with a locked gate. And the government complains about random camping and stuff. Well, we need to have these campgrounds open, and we can't be charging fees for services that really aren't there. They still want you to pay, I think, at $28.50 a night. Our policy on all our campgrounds is that you come and stay and you leave it better than you found it. The cost to you to camp in our campgrounds is nothing. It's free. It's a mutual thing. We keep our existence going and basically pay for the expenses of that maintenance through mainly memberships, but we've got a couple major fundraising things a year, and that's great. It keeps us going. The volunteerism, I hate to say a number because I might misrepresent it, but when they were showing the number of man hours, the number of dollars, the number of donated time and equipment use from private individuals or large construction companies is phenomenal. They support us very well. And so we will continue into the future. I guess our concerns going up until now is 5 out of our 6 campgrounds are basically in the area under question. What's the final outcome of that? And I should also say that Bighorn Campground, of course, is straight equestrian. You can't operate an OHV on Ahatinda Ranch. All the rest, except for 7 Mile, we're still bargaining and working with Parks Canada to give us right to put OHV use into there as well. But at this time, their regulations state that no OHV use on Parks Alberta property. So we're still working with that. And so multi-use is what we're shooting for. We want to hang in there, but the concern is what is going to happen when this whole thing settles? Is it going to be left in our hands to operate effective like we have for so many years? Or are they going to try to make it a wildlife park or a provincial park? And what are the rules in there? As you may know, like in Castle, they were offered a fairly warm approach to a park, and now that's not what they got in the end at all. And so I guess I don't think there's too many in this room that probably would disagree with me. I have an immense amount of distrust for this government from previous things that we've seen, whether it's... Thank you. All the way from Bill 6 in agriculture through to some of the other things that have gone on to this point. So yeah, we need to work together on this, and sounds like, I guess the report is relatively favorable. I must admit I haven't had a chance to go through that large document completely yet. So thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for having me as part of the panel here. And I've got some information on Friends of the Eastern Slopes if you want to see it. We got a little brochure we put out. Come see me later, and that'll be great.
Okay, thank you very much. You should give Larry a big hand. Okay, I would like to ask Ian Stewart to come up and present on behalf of the Alberta Fish and Game Association.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me here. So I'm here on behalf of the Alberta Fish and Game Association, and public access and OHVs are just one of a great number of things that the Alberta Fish and Game Association deals with. You probably know that there was a plan to basically close all fishing in the eastern slopes, and we can take credit for getting that one slowed down to give it a little bit of thought. There was another American-funded group that tried to take the credit, but I think most folks know where it really belongs. Dr. Darrell Smith, that's our fish chair. Anyway, OH vehicle use. The Alberta Fish and Game Association, and I have to say we're a pretty cumbersome organization. Our existing policy starts out by saying, for OHV use, basically starts out saying, we believe you should be able to use your OHV to pick up a downed game animal anywhere. It does go on to qualify that, but that's the first thing. And when we look at that now, you're dead in the water when you start out saying you can use your ATV to go pick up a downed game animal anywhere. So I have a draft copy of an updated OHV policy, and it's only a draft at this point. It hasn't been ratified by the organization, and it no doubt needs some tweaking, but I'd like to talk to you a little bit about it. And I think you'll find that it actually meshes very well with what we've heard here so far this evening. So starting off with public lands and public access. The Alberta Fish and Game Association believes that public access to public lands believes in public access, and that some degree of OHV use, access to public lands, can be achieved in a non-destructive, environmentally responsible manner. The AFGA is opposed to unsustainable, destructive use of publicly accessible land and fish and wildlife habitat by any means. The AFGA recognizes that unrestricted off-highway vehicle access may not be compatible in areas, in limited areas identified in land use plans and in some sensitive terrain. The AFG supports the use of designated OHV routes and suggests that rather than complete reclamation of obsolete industrial roads, partial decommissioning and utilization of existing infrastructure for such designated OHV routes, concurrent with eliminating OHV traffic from nearby sensitive terrain, would provide net environmental and recreational benefits greater than complete reclamation. In other words, use the infrastructure that's there when we decommission an industrial road rather than wipe it out, and in some cases wipe out a historic trail in the process. This one may need some tweaking. The AFGA suggests that revenues collected for licensing off-highway vehicles should be directed to enforcement of existing OHV use regulations and to the development of hard and designated routes. As we heard, it all disappears into general revenue right now, and there's no funding for those hard trails that I think most of the people in this room believe we need. The AFGA stresses that an off-highway vehicle operator must avoid damaging the environment when using an OHV. That's a little stronger statement that's in the existing policy. The AFGA stresses that an off-highway vehicle operator must consider the enjoyment, comfort, and safety of others when using an OHV, and will operate it in such a manner as to minimize disturbance to fish, wildlife, and other users. And then there's another clause that updates special permits and licenses to hunters with disabilities has been written into legislation and is already there. So that's kind of, it is definitely a draft at this point. It'll come to the convention next year for ratification, and I'm sure it'll get some changes before then. Is there anybody here from the Rocky Fish and Game Association? Great. So now is your chance, or not right now, but we want to get it updated and ratified and tweaked so that it works for most people. We're not going to please everyone at the total opposite ends of the spectrum. The folks that think it, and there are a few that think it's their right to tear the muskeg up, I'm afraid we can't support that now, because when you look at it, it's just not sustainable. And full disclosure, there's pictures of me 30 years ago with my quad stuck in the muskeg, up to the wheels. I'm not proud of it, but they're there. There's been a lot of great work done by organizations like the Bighorn Heritage ATV Society. I have certainly personally enjoyed that trail, and I've enjoyed the multi-use portion of it, riding a four-legged quad. The respect that people have, the quad users had for the horse users, I was very impressed on that multi-use trail. So personally, I'm convinced that multi-use can work with the right approach. I don't think it's necessary to turn everything into a park to protect it. And I make that point when I do sit down with the people like Y2Y, AWA, CPAWS. Full disclosure, I'm not afraid to go in the room with them. Some people tell me I shouldn't be in the same room, but if you're not in the same room, they have the floor. So I take a little different approach there. I do tell them that my personal belief is that ecotourism is an oxymoron. As soon as you add the word tourism into anything you're doing, you're obviously doing something you don't absolutely have to do to survive. So ecotourism is a much abused word in my personal opinion. That's not an AFGA position, that's just me. So in conclusion, I have nothing but respect for the work that's been done to maintain access to the public areas, to the designated trails. We definitely do have to look as ATV users at some of our past practices. You know, I've definitely done some of it myself years ago, and we just can't be tearing everything up, but we don't have to keep everybody out to protect our land that we all love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Good presentation. And now I'd like to ask Jason Smith from Safari Club International.
Hi there. I'm from Eckville, president of the Red Deer District chapter of SCI and the chair for the Alberta chapters of SCI. One small misconception about SCI, I'll just get that out there, is that they're a pile of African safari guys, and as much as most of us would love to be, that's far from the truth for many. My chapter probably spends 95% of their money that we raise in Alberta and the other 5 going in Canada. And I would say that is a very similar amount for some of the other chapters that are in Alberta. So we support 100% of the trail use, the work that these people are doing on the trails, and we're here to put our foot forward and our hands out to offer help in any way we can. We have been lobbying government for quite a while on some of the things that we disagree with. One thing that is really big bone of contention with us is the only people that should have a say in what happens on these trails and in this province are Albertans. I firmly believe that I was born here, I was raised here, I pay taxes here, I get one vote. The people from other countries, other jurisdictions, other provinces or whatever, they don't get a say. If they want to say, move here, pay your taxes, vote. That is the only way it is. Alberta is for Albertans. I have horses, I have quads, I have side-by-sides, I even have a few backpacks, and I use them all. And I have never once been on a trail with my horse, with my backpack, or with my quad that I felt endangered, threatened, abused by anybody. People, when I'm on my horse, they slow right down. Most of the time they shut their quads off, give me 10 minutes to pass. Whether I'm hiking, they slow right down. I've never seen a better group of people. As an outfitter myself, it's the best job in the world because outdoorsmen and sportsmen and people that spend their time in the West Country are some of the best people I've ever met. I don't have issues in the West Country. I can't say that when I go to the city when I'm trying to park my vehicle or shop in the mall before Christmas. there is an inherent difference to the people that are out there. And one thing that we do, and we are the only people that do this, is we pay to recreate on every avenue, every time we turn a corner, everything we do. And we don't pay dollars, we don't pay hundreds of dollars, we pay thousands of dollars, whether you're a hunter, a fisherman, or a user of the West Country. We pay every time we turn around, and we're proud to do it. And there's a pile of volunteers in this room too. They spend thousands of their hard-earned dollars, after-tax dollars, to donate to these trails. They do it, and they do it givingly and willingly, and we're the only people that do that. And some keyboard warrior in another country or another jurisdiction, they don't do that. So we need to write these letters. We need to get on the doorstep of our elected members and fight for this. And there isn't enough people in this room. We need these packed. You need to talk to your neighbors. You need to push this on every avenue. And SCI is here to support anything that supports these trails in multi-use for every Albertan, and that is final. No one else, just the people in this room that belong in this province. That's our stance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Now I'd like to ask Rick he's the ADM of the Land Use Secretariat, and Rick will speak on the planning process. And then we'll have Jason Nixon. He's joined us for a few minutes, and then we'll go into our Q&A.
Thanks so much. I think before I get started, the one thing that I'd like to do is to just give you a little bit of my background so I'm not seen or perceived as a keyboard warrior. I do live in Edmonton, but just a bit of my background in terms of helping you to understand how I might see or understand these issues is I spent 5 years as a National Park Warden in Jasper as a backcountry warden, so I understand the equestrian part of things and the backcountry. I've lived all over Alberta. I'm a forester by training, and I spent 11 years in Calgary dealing with the Castle, the Ghost, Willow Creek. Butch Shenfield is in the room. We collaborated a lot on the Bighorn because the two butted up against each other. So it's important for you to understand that I've actually been out in the woods. I don't just live in the city. So my background is such that I think I have a pretty good understanding of a lot of the things that are going on here. But with that, what I'd like to talk about tonight is, okay, the right one? Okay, good stuff. Is the North Saskatchewan Regional Plan. In my job as the Stewardship Commissioner, it's my job to make sure that as we carry out regional planning processes, we do so in a manner where we look and listen to all of the input that's provided to us. If you actually look at the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, which is the act that drives regional planning, it actually has embedded right in the legislation that it is our job as we develop regional plans to look at and evaluate the social, economic, and environmental benefits and address those in a regional plan. So it's a broad spectrum approach. So that's part of regional planning. There we go. The other right. There we are. Okay, so again, what I hope to do tonight is just talk about the whole purpose and process around regional planning so you understand it, because there's a number of different levels of planning in Alberta, the timeline and the process that we're in right now with the North Saskatchewan Regional Plan, because a very big part of the regional plan is getting your feedback and input. And I want to make sure you understand how that takes place and make sure you know what opportunity is there for you to do that. Okay, okay, excellent. Thank you, sir. And with that, maybe I'll stand over here. So the purpose of a regional plan is to integrate government's existing policies, because as most of you certainly know, when you go out on Alberta's real estate, there's all sorts of activities that take place on that real estate. We've got grazing, aggregate, forestry, oil and gas, recreation, and the list goes on and on. All of those different policies, if we're not integrating them, can be in conflict with one another. So a regional plan tries to do things in a way that we sort out all of that noise and everybody understands how their activities on the landscape impact others, and we're not creating hardship for ourselves. We're actually trying to solve all of those problems through the planning process. Part of that, again, is addressing pressing land use management concerns and policy conflicts. There were some earlier comments about things like water. You've heard a lot of comments about the eastern slopes and water. For most of you that are aware, the old Rocky Mountain Forest Reserve Act that was put in place was absolutely based on good quality water and maintaining good quality water. But many of our management plans already deal with good quality water. So it's not that it's new to us. We've been dealing with this for many, many years. It's to provide regional scale guidance and support. So the local staff that you might know here, Don Livingston's in the room. Where's Don? Wave, Don. Most of you probably know Don very well. He's been the heartbeat of a lot of this off-highway vehicle and recreational planning work. It helps to give guidance to Don when he's trying to do his job and help to support out all the different conflicting uses, because all the policies make sense. And one of the things that's really important for us is, for me as the land use commissioner, to talk to people like Don, so I'm not creating a regional plan, or my team's not creating a regional plan in the nice ivory tower in Edmonton. We're talking to the people who are out here who are dealing with you every day to hear what your issues are and the types of things that need to be resolved. And then lastly, to promote Albertans' needs and values. So you're the people in the room. You're the Albertans whose needs and values we're here to listen to and to try to build a plan that supports those needs and values. Next, please. So when I talked about the hierarchy, Alberta's a complex province, and every part of Alberta is different. Every corner of the province is different. So we look at it both from a provincial scale, which is the really high-level policy. So again, the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, which drives regional planning for the whole province. Then we go down to regions. So the North Saskatchewan region, and I'll show you a map shortly, it actually shows the NSRP, and Alberta is broken down into 7 distinct regions, each of those largely defined by a major watershed. So in this case, the North Saskatchewan is largely defined by the North Saskatchewan River watershed. They're good geographic regions to plan around, and in many instances, they're quite similar, but also you can imagine when you see the map from the North Saskatchewan Regional Plan, if you start at the eastern slopes and go all the way to Lloydminster, the landscape changes a bit as you go west to east. So not all things apply equally across that region. So the plan has to reflect that. And then we have sub-regional plans. A really good example here would be the Bighorn Access Management Plan. So that is a sub-regional plan underneath the regional plan that helps to deal with the specifics on-the-ground details of things like recreation. And then when we get to place-based rules and decisions, those are things like forest management plans. So again, sundry forest products. What does their plan look like, and how does it nest in all of these other plans? So it's a very complex system, but it helps us to try to understand things both at a very, very high policy level all the way down to the ground, because those are very different things and you need different plans to do that. Next. So in terms of a timeline or a history for regional planning, the concept of regional planning in Alberta came to be in December of 2008. The Alberta Land Stewardship Act was actually established in the fall of 2009 that led to regional planning. The Land Use Secretariat, which now I lead, was established to help implement regional plans. And in my role, I don't just represent environment and parks. I represent all different government departments through a committee, because again, a regional plan isn't just based on the impacts of environment and parks. There's forestry elements and agriculture elements and oil and gas elements. So I have a number of ADMs who work with me as well as their staff to help make sure that these plans reflect that very broad suite of resource use and issues that we have across the province, not just one view of one department. The first regional plan actually came out in September of 2012. That was the Lower Athabasca Regional Plan. The reason it was done first is, as you can imagine, in the northeast corner of the province, that was at a time when Alberta's economy was glowing red hot, and the oil sands development was fast and furious, and we needed a mechanism to try to better understand that rapid pace of growth and development. So that was the reason the Lower Athabasca was done first. We learned a lot from that plan, and then the second plan that came out was the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan. The reason that plan was done second was because of the major water issues in southern Alberta. So we all know that as you kind of go away from the eastern slopes in the south, good example was last year, in a dry summer and fall, places like Milk River and the St. Mary's River, they almost run out of water in a bad year. So understanding how land use impacted water down there was very, very important. That was the reason we did the second plan. The North Saskatchewan plan, which we're in right now, is also very important because it goes again all the way from the eastern slopes, the provider of water to the city of Edmonton and everything east of the eastern slopes, all the way to the Saskatchewan border. Has high recreation value. It's also home of the industrial heartland all around Edmonton, Refinery Row, all of those types of things. Lots of manufacturing for oil and gas development and other industry, and then into agriculture further east. So very diverse land use, and also home to about 1.5 million people, even a bit more than that, as you go across the swath in central Alberta. So the way the regional plan works is, if we can go to the next one, that'll help, is, as I said, it's a very, very diverse piece of real estate going all the way from the border of Banff National Park all the way to the Saskatchewan border. It's important to note that national parks are not included in the regional plan because they're actually federal land base. We have no control over them. But we certainly consider the impacts of a national park in a regional plan when we think about things like recreation, grizzly bears, because big species like grizzly bears really don't care about the line we draw on a map. They happily walk back and forth. So we have to be very thoughtful about how they play into the larger land base. But it just goes to show the complexity and diversity of the landscape that we're dealing with. And our first starting point when we do a regional plan is what's called a baseline assessment. So we go out and we gather an enormous amount of information in regards to the economic drivers for the region, a lot of the different environmental parameters and issues that are of concern, and a lot of the social issues. So when I talk social, recreational use, the types of things that people see that really matters here. And we use all that information to then provide to what's called a regional advisory council. Next. So again, the priority areas that we look at in a regional plan, and these are all of the different types of information that what we gather, and then we provide to a regional plan. And if you've had a chance to read the North Saskatchewan Regional Plan, or the RAC advice, if you will, the RAC advice does not belong to the province. That advice was prepared by a group of 27 individuals who all volunteered. They come from that broad cross-section of real estate that you saw, being the North Saskatchewan region. Some very much acquainted with this part of the landscape. At the time of the Regional Advisory Committee's development, the Reeve from Clearwater County was actually on that group, so very, very much understood the local circumstance here. All the way to people with a farming and ranching background close to the Saskatchewan border. So a very, very diverse group. But to try to make sure that they understood all of those different dynamics for the entire region, our staff from a host of different departments provide them with an enormous amount of information on these types of topics. So in terms of encouraging economic growth and diversification, we provide them with good background and statistics on the different economic drivers in the region. So again, many of you'd be familiar here, agriculture, ranching, energy, forestry, aggregate, tourism, and tourism in this case is again a very broad term. The original presentation at the outset defined visitor nights, all those types of things. Those types of things go into that definition. Supporting growing communities. So building sustainable communities and efficient use of land. Particularly, the term efficient use of land is built around the idea that if we look at a city like Edmonton or a city like Calgary, you see that huge growth. They call it urban sprawl, if you will, for lack of a better term. Is that an efficient use of land, or can we use land more efficiently to achieve, again, broad outcomes, but perhaps have a softer footprint? On the sustainable communities piece, one of the things that we look at as well is, if, as an example, we select an area that we think is of great value for recreation and tourism, do we have access to it? Do we have to work with transportation and say in 20 years we think this area is going to look like this in terms of inviting people for recreation and tourism development, does that mean we need a new highway? Do we have to double the highway? What does that look like? So we can begin to plan for that. And then strengthening relationships with Indigenous communities. For the North Saskatchewan Regional Plan, we've had a parallel process for the last couple of years with many First Nations and Métis groups that have been giving us good advice, just like the RAC did, in regards to what they see of value and interest as we prepare a plan, and that group has actually worked very, very well with us. Next. And then near and dear to this plan, and certainly a lot of the things that we hear around the Bighorn, lots of environmental issues. So managing air, perhaps not such a big issue here, but probably many of you heard around the Red Deer area, there were some issues last year that were raised with particulate matter in the Red Deer region. So how do we better manage the airshed to make sure that we're dealing with pollutants and things like particulate matter that have big issues on human health? Landscapes and biodiversity, very near and dear to the topic of the Bighorn. Managing water and watersheds, very similar to the Bighorn. And managing outdoor recreation. And again, when we think about these things, we think about not only what they look like today, but what will they look like down the road. In our mind, a regional plan is a look 50 years out. So what will things look like? What will the demand be 50 years from now? Next. Oh, thanks. So just in terms of where we are in the process today. So at the outset, as I said, the first little dot on the left is understanding the current state and define the regional vision. So that was done to support the Regional Advisory Committee. The Regional Advisory Committee has created a report, and just again to be clear, that's not the view of government, that's the view of the Regional Advisory Committee. They provide that to us based on all of their input and all of their local knowledge in regards to they think what that should look like. And now you see the big dot that says NSRP, we're here today. What we're doing now is we're seeking input on that Regional Advisory Committee advice document. I'll get into the details in a minute, but this is a very, very important step in the process because this is your opportunity now to provide us with your views on that RAC advice. Do you believe they got it right? Did they miss anything? Are they way off base? Are they close? What would you tweak? And this is your opportunity to tell us if they missed something, what did they miss? If you disagree with something, what do you disagree with and why? I have to really kind of push you on that one. If you disagree with it, don't just say you disagree. Tell us why you disagree, because then we'll understand what your issue is. Once we get that feedback, we take all of that different information and we begin to look at the different options and we create a draft regional plan. Once that draft is created, we then go out again for another round of public consultation. And we'll ask for your feedback on the draft, because at that point in time, it's actually a government plan. It's a draft government plan. So we want to hear, based on everything we heard, did we get it right? And if we didn't, we want to hear from you. Once we've had that input, we finalize it considering all of that feedback, and then the document actually goes to Cabinet for approval, because it's a Cabinet-approved document, and once it is approved, it becomes law. And all other plans have to align with the regional plan. So it's a very, very powerful document when it's done. Next. So the RAC document recommendations. It provides key advice areas on conservation areas, certainly something very near and dear to the hearts of this group. It talks about a number of recommendations on the management of outdoor recreation. It provides certain recommendations for the Bighorn area in particular. It talks about permitted activities, or again, recommends permitted activities. It talks about different types of land use, and it talks about different types of economic development. So all things that we want to hear from you in regards to, in their recommendations or their advice to us, did they get it right? Or did they miss something? Next. So in terms of the timeline and the ways to get involved, we can jump to the next one really quickly. Sorry about that. The Regional Advisory Committee started work in July of 2014. They provided us with their advice in late fall of 2014. And We were given the document in 2015. It's taken us a while to get it out for public review because there's been a number of other big initiatives underway right now. But where we stand is the document is out now, and we are looking for your feedback and input over the next 6 to 8 weeks with a survey closing on the 4th of May. I'll give you a website here on the last slide. The survey is actually online, so you go online to do the work. And again, I was talking to somebody before we got started tonight, and they said that they had looked at the survey and they found it a little difficult, or they weren't quite sure how to fill it out. What it largely represents is it will have a major statement from RAC about a particular thing, and then it asks for your comments on it. So when you read that particular bullet and it asks for your comments, we want you to be really, really thoughtful about what does that statement mean to you, and does it actually encompass your values or your interests? And if it doesn't, tell us what you don't like about it. What's it missing? And again, if you have any questions, you can actually call us. I'll have the number here as well for the Land Use Secretariat. So if there's something in the survey that's not ringing true to you, or you need a bit more context, just give us a call and we'll try to walk you through it. Next. So again, just to be clear at the top, all of the input received by the government on the RAC recommendations is gathered and held by the Land Use Secretariat. All input is treated equally. So I want everybody to know that regardless of where information comes from, there's no dominant information from one sector or another. Everything that we get goes all into the same analysis, and we look at everything equally. So you're asked to invite if you go to www.landuse.alberta.ca, you'll see a very prominent banner that says North Saskatchewan Regional Plan. Please provide us with your input. Simply click on that banner and it will take you right to the survey process. And that closes on May the 4th, 2018. And again, as I'd mentioned, for First Nations and Métis, we have a parallel process that we're working with them right now as well. So I want to really encourage you to take this opportunity and go to that survey site and fill out the survey. I was at the AOHV website and took a good look at it, and I see there's already a number of posts trying to drive people to the survey. I really, really want to reinforce we need your feedback and your input. So go, please do the survey. Next. What I also wanted to talk about here is I want to, and all the other speakers spoke about this. Many of these gentlemen right here have actually taken me out to go through Rigg Street and look at the good work that's been done out there. I spent a whole day with them, and this gentleman here does work very hard. But what I just wanted to talk about was just in the last couple of days on the AOHVA site, you'll see some information about a grant that was just provided. The Department of Environment and Parks, actually the Land Use Secretariat, just provided a grant to both the Friends of the Eastern Slopes, and we're still negotiating just to make sure that it's going to the right place. We've talked to the AOHVA, Bighorn Heritage ATV Society, CTI, to go to one of those entities to make sure it's going to the right place. But those grant dollars are meant to support the really good work that you've already heard about tonight. And I want to make sure that people aren't saying, you gave a grant just to coincide with this meeting. No, those grants have been under development since December, and they are intended to support exactly what you see in those pictures. We know that the Friends of the Eastern Slopes has done enormous work on campgrounds and facilities in the Bighorn area. Without them, those facilities would be in a serious state of disrepair. We know that the Bighorn ATV Society and a number of the people here, the AOHVA, has done yeoman's work on trails. And one of the things I also wanted to recognize was in terms of demonstrating responsible stewardship from a motorized perspective, some of the members of those groups actually took great peril a number of years ago and have actually asked the department at times to close trails. They have asked us to close trails because they have put a lot of time and effort into maintaining those trails. And as an example, we've had an incredibly wet spring. So now those trails are really, really vulnerable to heavy OHV use because they're so wet. So you can imagine when the OHV community comes to us and says, shut down the trails just before the May long weekend, when a lot of people want to go out and use those trails, that's tough for them to do as well. But they've done that. That's a demonstration of responsible use and understanding the impacts on the environment. So these grants are to recognize that good use, that good work, and good recognition of good stewardship. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't lost, because for us this is a really important piece, because we do recognize and understand good work. So with that, I'll pass it back.
Thank you, Rick. I'm sure in a few minutes there's going to be lots of questions. I'm just going to speak for a moment on the public consultation survey. The AOHV encourages all outdoor users to complete the survey as soon as possible. This is one of the few opportunities outdoor users will have to help guide the process. Questions regarding careful consideration. The survey is structured for comments only, no multiple choice, yes, no, true, false. As such, it is important that you, and to build on what Rick said, as such, it's important that you take the time to consider and explain your perspective when providing your comments. The following survey questions are most relevant to OHV use and open camping. Question 4, question 6, and question 7. The Alberta Off-Highway has been getting feedback on the RAC for a bit, and we're going to have some suggestions on our website early next week on some of them questions, you know, to help some people if you wish. And Rick has provided that opportunity as well. So we're just going to provide some background information from OHV users how that question should be answered, because, and we've heard feedback from people as well that the questions are open-ended or unclear or confusing, right? Or all of the above, right? So you can watch on the Alberta Off-Highway website. That'll be coming up real soon. So, okay, Jason's gonna come up and speak for a few moments. Jason Nixon, the local MLA. And then we will have a question and answer period. You can ask anybody questions here. We'll have quite a while for that here. So I'll turn it over to Jason.
You know, I won't be too long. I had a haul not too long ago talking about this, and I will stay to answer any questions that I can help with tonight. But I want to first recognize the important groups that are up here today talking to you. I know all of these groups, proud to work with them as your MLA, and proud of all the work that they're doing for our West Country, as we fondly call it. And I can tell you, without them, we'd be in dire straits. They are our representatives, and they've done a great job, and them all a round of applause. You know, our current government, and I'm not going to get too partisan, though I am in Rocky Mountain House, so I'm fairly safe on that. But our current government has really messed up on this file. That's not to say that the last government didn't mess up as well, because they did. But of late, since the Castle, and what happened in the Castle, how fast that happened, the lack of consultation with the community, the total disregard for the economic benefit of that area, and the whole way that handled was absolutely terrible. And what that has done is that has created a situation of absolute distrust that all of our communities have with this current government. It's not, it is, that is a fact. And we have, as the opposition, been bringing that message on your behalf to Edmonton, saying, not just on how they've handled the Eastern Slopes, but Bill 6, the attacks on our agriculture community, the complete lack of understanding of rural Alberta, the complete lack of communicating with our constituents, and the complete lack of only communicating to people that have their worldview, has created a situation where we don't trust them. And then when it comes to the Bighorn in our area, we've been hearing rumors for a long time, maps that are being floated around by organizations, some of them that are not even from this province, talking about the future of our backyard, people that don't even know what is out there. And then this current government, and I don't want to rag on the ADM, I do appreciate them being here, because this is what we've been this is what we've been asking for. But this current government has not come out and talked to our community, and they've created a situation where people are scared. And we've been asking them for months. That's why I held that haul back in February, where they had to shut down Highway 22 to get everybody in, because we were trying to send a message to the government that we will not accept what happened in the Castle in our area, that we demand that our community has a seat at the table to decide the future of our backyard. We are starting to get some traction on that. The fact that there's an ADM here, I would suggest, actually shows some of that traction. We've been asking for a couple of years now for the RAC to be released. It's been released, and I encourage everybody to participate in the process that the ADM showed everybody tonight to make sure that our voices are heard going forward. In the meantime, you rest assured that the opposition, and I have Jason Kenney's assurance on this, he's been here just a few weeks ago, he was back here with me again. He'll be camping with me west of Rocky Mountain House on the May long weekend, and he will be up in a helicopter having a look at what our situation, our backyard is, so he can understand it. That's important. I believe he'll be the next premier, and I want him to know what it is. But while we are still opposition, you have our assurances that we will continue to fight to make sure that your voice is heard during this process, that Albertans make the decision about what happens with our backyard and nobody else. And you also have our assurances that if we are fortunate enough to form government in 2019, that we will continue with that approach, that we believe that these groups up here, and you find folks in this room, are the best people to manage our West Country. It's the only model that I've seen work. Some of you know I lived on the Forestry Trunk Road and the Red Deer River for 7 years. I know our West Country probably better than any other member of the legislature. It was literally my backyard. And the only model that I've ever seen work is the Eastern Slopes, the Bighorn ATV Society, and those type of groups to be able to manage that. And we will continue to make sure that's how it is in the future. You have assurance on this one key thing. We can preserve the Eastern Slopes in our backyard for future generations, but we can preserve it in such a way that we can still utilize the greatest backyard in the world. And I promise you we'll keep fighting for that.
Thank you, Jason.